pRISm is the queer connection group here at RS, and we're thrilled that you all are here now to be part of this event. We're very proud of our synagogue, and so any chance to get people into our doors, especially for a reason as good as this. So thank you, and I'm going to turn it over to Abby Gilbert, and I'll see you shortly.
Thank you, Heshie. And very excited to be here at Rodeph Shalom and to see many longtime friends and to make some new ones. We were really thrilled at Tikvah, where I am the executive director, to have the opportunity to be part of today's program. Tikvah is an agency here in the greater Philadelphia area that works with adults with the lived experience of mental illness around their social and community integration needs, and also with their family members and those who are adjacent to them in their lives. Some of you who've known me for a long time know that I'm also involved in Holocaust education work, a longtime supporter of HAMEC, the Holocaust Awareness Museum and Education Center. You'll hear more about that in just a few minutes. But one of the things that I've learned over the years is that people who have experienced the kinds of severe crisis, both personally and communally, that folks experienced during the Holocaust cannot help but come away from those episodes in their lives without some level of post-traumatic stress disorder. And if people have a predisposition, personally or familially, to any kind of mental health concern, very often crisis can be the trigger that brings those behaviors and those episodes to the forefront in people's lives. So Tikvah, which is a grassroots organization that was founded by parents with sons and daughters who have the lived experience of mental illness, is very interested in working with our synagogues and with the organizations that support the families who have been part of the Holocaust survival experience in having what they need in the community. What we do is to produce and facilitate about 12 programs in the course of each month in various neighborhoods around the greater Philadelphia area that allow people to come together around common interest or together with other people who live near them geographically, but also are struggling with how to make social connections that are comfortable, that are without some of the complications and stresses that modern life sometimes forces us into, to be able to heal beyond the trauma of various things. So again, we're really excited as an agency to be part of this program this evening and really all learn together about the experiences that the authors in the room have written about regarding resilience in times of crisis. At this time, I'm very excited to call on my friend and colleague, fabulous Flores, who is the first CEO of our local Holocaust Awareness Museum and Education Center, to tell you about the work of that institution. Hello, fabulous.
Thank you, Abby. Thank you, everyone, for being here, and for being here and spending time with us. And thank you for Peter and Heshie Heshie and Abby at Tikvah for making sure this event today went on without a hitch. So as Abby said, I am the CEO of America's first Holocaust museum. We are located in Elkins Park. And while we are a museum, our primary mission is to bring Holocaust education to schools or various organizations. We bring speakers, first generation, although unfortunately time is not on our side with that, so we really hit the ground running this past school year. We finished out this school year alone with doing over 217 school programs with over 22,000 students in attendance. We've also started using our second and third generation speakers, so we are trying to integrate that and keeping the mission going and keeping it alive. So if anybody knows of any school, and that could be a local school or it could be an international school. We've spoken on every continent except Antarctica, so if you have an Antarctica connection, let me know. So it doesn't have to just be local. Please reach out to us and let us know. We would love to provide programming for them as well. We would also love to have you come and visit our museum or bring a group of people to come and visit our museum. We are available by appointment. And finally, again, I would just like to say, a special thank you to all of you for taking the time to be a part of our mission and the mission of our organizations who partnered on this. And without further ado, I would like to introduce Heshie.
So I want to give you just a little background of pRISm. pRISm, again, is the LGBTQIA connection group here at RS. It was the outgrowth of Beth Ahava, which was the queer synagogue that was created, I guess, in the 70s. So at one time, believe it or not, LGBT people were not welcome in many mainstream religious organizations. And so we started our own, Beth Ahava. It was a traveling congregation. And when we finally got a space on Letitia Street, where we had our own sanctuary, our own Torah scrolls, we ultimately lost, or the owners of that space decided they wanted to sell the building, and so we lost our lease at Letitia Street, and we needed to find a congregation, and we hooked up with folks here at RS, and RS invited Beth Ahava to come to RS, occupy a space downstairs, so it was like a mini Beth Ahava prayer space, and we had Beth Ahava and RS, two 501c3s, and anybody that's familiar with nonprofit knows why would you want a 501c3 if you didn't need it. And so basically in 2015, we realized that Beth Ahava did not need its own 501c3 because in fact, we were very welcomed by RS. We did a lot of work here at RS to make sure that we walk the walk in terms of equity, inclusion, and diversity. We did a lot of training, and it's been a tremendous partnership since 2015 and actually before. But I tell you all this because we've done work, we do educational programming at pRISm and social activities, and we have done programming before with an author who has Pink Triangle Legacies, who started writing about the impact of the Holocaust on LGBT people in Berlin at that time. And so the LGBT people are unfortunately experienced with discrimination and stigma. And so here at RS, we found a space where we were welcomed in, where we didn't need a 501c3, where we could practice who we were and we could be authentic about our gayness or our queerness. And so it was a great relationship for both RS and for Beth Ahava, and so that relationship turned into pRISm. So pRISm is now the LGBTQIA connection group here at RS. And so when when there was an opportunity through David Preston to bring this event to RS, we couldn't have been more thrilled because it is fully in line with our values. Our values are a moral compass, so we were thrilled to be able to continue that in collaboration with Tikvah and HAMEC. And so that's all that I have to say, but it's a little snapshot of pRISm and the history here at RS. And so I am now going to turn it over to David Lee Preston. Yeah, that's your name. It's your turn. Come on up.
Thanks, Heshie, and thank you, Renee Carl, as well, for paving the way for us to gather here today in this beautiful space. Thank you, Fabulous, Abby, and Brenda Kinnear, Barbara Punchek, and Jeffrey Strauss. Forgive me if I've forgotten anyone. I'm not forgetting you, Peter Wiesner. Thank you for the idea of this reception and for inviting me to introduce our honoree. I'm David Lee Preston. My wife, Rhonda Goldfein, and I live here in Center City, Philadelphia, and I'm a longtime member of Sons and Daughters of Holocaust Survivors of Greater Philadelphia, one of the oldest second-generation groups in the world, founded in 1979. I grew up a few miles down the road, down Interstate 95 in Wilmington, where my parents moved in 1951 after they got married, and only a few years after they had emerged from different locations and circumstances in the hell we've come to call the Holocaust. They met while he was working as an engineer in Boston, and she was studying in the Teachers Institute of the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York. Helena Wind was the first Holocaust survivor to speak publicly across the United States, sent by the seminary on a speaking tour beginning in 1949, and a woman who heard her speak in Camden, New Jersey, made the shidduch, writing to a cousin about the young woman she had heard speak. That cousin was the Boston engineer, George Preston, the former Grisha Pushkolnik, a survivor of Auschwitz, Buchenwald, Auschwitz-Birkenau, and Buchenwald. Helena was among the 10 Jews who hid for 14 months in the sewers of Lviv, hidden by Polish Catholic sewer workers, the ordeal dramatized by the Polish director Agnieszka Holland in the Oscar-nominated movie In Darkness. And I was 10 years old in 1965 when George made worldwide headlines when he flew to Frankfurt to testify at the Auschwitz war crimes trials, testimony that led to a murder conviction for a Nazi capo named Emil Bednarik. I retired 5 years ago after a long career in journalism, most of it here at the Philadelphia Inquirer and Daily News. The Inquirer gave me the opportunity to write a trilogy of cover stories about my parents in the old Sunday magazine in 1983, 85, and 95. an opportunity not unlike the one that Liesbeth Heenk has extended to our generation, including these fine folks among us today in this room, to participate in a process of honoring that generation's suffering, to discover truth, emotion, and inspiration, and share it with the world. A process that thus far has led to 116 books by 108 authors, with I think 5 due to come out next month, making this self-effacing, non-Jewish trained professional art historian in Amsterdam the world's leading publisher of Holocaust memoirs. Lest anyone think that this business of Holocaust memoirs is irrelevant, permit me to cite a few events from just the last few days as reported by reputable news organizations. Milan, dozens of professionally printed blue and white posters bearing the message "Israeli not welcome" are plastered on storefronts, walls, and metro station entrances, including near the city's Jewish quarter. Hung anonymously with no group claiming responsibility, Jewish City Council member Danielle Nahum said anti-Semitism in Milan is now, quote, out of control. David Romano, director of the Jewish Brigade Museum in Milan, said, "This is institutional anti-Semitism. It starts with words and ends in actions." Rouen, Normandy. An armed man climbs onto the roof of a synagogue and throws a Molotov cocktail into the sanctuary, causing significant damage and prompting the mayor, Nicolas Mayer-Rossignol, to say, "It is impossible to deny the fact that while the Jews in France constitute only 1% of the population, 60% of the anti-religious acts are aimed at Jews, anti-Semitic acts." Pilton, Somerset. Yesterday, 200,000 people at the 5-day Glastonbury Festival, Britain's biggest music festival. Here, the London-based punk duo Bob Dylan lead the crowd in chants of "Death, death to the IDF," as members of the audience hoist Palestinian flags, and Mo Chara halts a performance of his Belfast-based hip-hop trio Kneecap to tell the crowd, quote, "I don't have to lecture you people. Israel are war criminals." Today, the Glastonbury organization issued a statement regarding Bob Dylan, saying he had, quote, "crossed a line." But that line is being crossed with increasing regularity, and we don't have to look overseas to recognize it. It was crossed ominously 2 months ago, right here in Pennsylvania, on the first night of Passover, when a 38-year-old former mechanic named Cody Allen Balmer was charged with breaking into the governor's mansion in Harrisburg and using 2 Molotov cocktails to set the residence on fire, while the Jewish governor, Philly's own Josh Shapiro, and his family were asleep after their Seder. They got out in time, but Balmer told the authorities after he turned himself in that he was planning to physically assault Governor Shapiro with a sledgehammer if he had encountered him. He was charged with terrorism, attempted murder, aggravated arson, and aggravated assault. And just yesterday, here in Philly, I watched about 100 Iran war protesters led by the Party for Socialism and Liberation chant, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be freed. And from the sea to the river, Palestine will live forever," as they marched with police escort on Walnut Street toward Rittenhouse Square. You can watch it too. I posted a short video on my Facebook page. Liesbeth Heenk understands the threat. In 1939, the Jewish population of the Netherlands was about 150,000, more than half of whom lived in Amsterdam. 75% of the Dutch Jews were murdered, and by 1945, only about 35,000 were alive. She remembers her mother telling her and her siblings around the dinner table about how she, as a young girl, had carried pamphlets in her bike for the Dutch resistance. But Liesbeth didn't set out to become the leading publisher of Holocaust memoirs. She is an art historian specialized in Van Gogh. Am I pronouncing it correctly? That is, for Americans, Van Gogh. After she got a BA and an MA in art history at Leiden University, she worked as assistant curator for the Van Gogh 1990 centenary exhibition at the Krüller-Müller Museum in Otterlo, the world's second largest Van Gogh collection, and she wrote her PhD thesis on Van Gogh's drawings in 1995. As a print specialist at Christie's in London from 1994 to 98, she discovered Rembrandt's copper plate Abraham Entertaining the Angels when examining the back of a painting on copper by the Flemish Baroque painter Peter Geysels. The copper plate, made by Rembrandt in 1656, was acquired at auction by the National Gallery of Art in Washington. She was director of business development at Sotheby's in Amsterdam, and in 2009 she sat on the scientific committee for the Van Gogh exhibition at the Complesso del Vittoriano in Rome, while working for the royal household at the Royal Palace of Amsterdam. She has sat on various committees of Dutch museums. In 2012, Liesbeth's moral compass impelled her to abandon this significant art career to begin publishing Holocaust memoirs under the imprint Amsterdam Publishers. When I met her the other day in a Zoom chat, I was struck by her humility and her humanity. She told me that she regards Amsterdam Publishers as a channel, a safe haven where stories about the Holocaust can be told because the Holocaust is not anymore sufficiently known. She spoke to me of the consequences of anti-Semitism and said statistics show that fewer people are buying Holocaust-related books. Maybe, she said, they don't want to be seen in trains and trams reading Holocaust-related books. I was inspired and humbled to meet her, and I know that I speak for all of us here today when I say that our parents are with us in this moment, when I am deeply honored to introduce Dr. Liesbeth Heenk.
Impressive. It is as if you were talking about somebody else, David. Thank you very much for these lovely words. Can everybody hear me? I'm not sure. Yes. Okay. And thank you very much for the organizers of this beautiful event. It was a bright spring day in April 2015. I was pushing Manny Steinberg, then 90 years old, in his wheelchair across the gravel path of Dachau. The beige stones crunched beneath the wheels. Manny, a Holocaust survivor and the author of the second survivor memoir I had published, had returned to Germany for the first time since the war. He had been invited by the German government to attend a commemoration at one of his former camps, Weingen an der Enns, and decided also to visit Dachau. Manny was joined by his son, his daughter, and a grandson. And as I pushed the wheelchair, I watched him closely. The longer we stayed at the campsite, the more withdrawn he became. He barely spoke. It was the smell of the soil, Manny later told me. It hadn't changed in 70 years. That smell alone had the power to pull him back to his years in the camps. On that day in Dachau, pushing Manny across the grounds he had once walked as a prisoner and listening to his stories and his family's, I understood the full impact a Holocaust testimony could have. It can help to heal deep wounds. The impact of these stories is profound. For many survivors, it is the first time their voices are truly heard. So on that day, I made myself a promise: if I can make this work financially, this is what I will dedicate my life to. When Manny died, by the way,
a copy of his book, Outcry Memoirs, was buried with him. More than a decade has passed. I've now published, as David said, almost 116 books, not scholarly works, but true stories written by survivors, their children and grandchildren, alongside a few carefully chosen novels. And this is just the beginning. I've said it before, my mission will not be complete until all 6 million stories are told. I consider myself fortunate to receive manuscript in English from all over the world. Although I'm based in Holland, I don't focus on the Dutch market at all. I don't have a single Dutch author. Or at least, well, Eli, are you half Dutch?
I'm fully Dutch.
Fully Dutch, yes. This is my very first Dutch author to be. And of all the manuscripts submitted for publication, I accept only a few. On average, I publish between 15 and 20 books each year. We are in a dark place now, as you know, and as you've just heard. What we're seeing today is not new. It's the oldest hatred repackaged, disguised, and brought into the mainstream. In today's polarized climate, anti-Semitism thrives, often cloaked in the language of social justice or political critique. It feeds on misinformation and ignorance. More than ever, Holocaust stories matter. They remind us of where anti-Semitism can lead. As the Irish statesman Conor Cruise O'Brien once wrote, anti-Semitism is a light sleeper. It awakens when society falters, and it spreads quickly. The widespread lack of historical awareness only makes it worse. One might think the situation in the US is alarming, and it is. But the reality in the Netherlands is not much better. Anti-Semitic incidents there are disturbingly high. Israeli flags can be burned, Maccabi football fans, as you may have seen on the news, can be harassed, and Jewish citizens openly threatened, often in the name of justice, all with little to no consequence. Politicians remain silent, afraid to offend. Across the political spectrum, anti-Semitism has become increasingly normalized. There is a persistent lack of decision-making across government, I'm talking about Holland still, law enforcement and public institutions, all in the name of political correctness, which has become something of a national mantra. Just last weekend, members of our country's largest socialist party voted to hold support for Israel's Iron Dome. And this same party will, I believe, definitely be in power as from October. So let's hope the war will be ended by then and all hostages will be freed. Holocaust stories are not just about suffering. Something happened here? Okay, sorry.
Good.
Holocaust stories are not just about suffering. They are about resilience, resourcefulness, and an astonishing capacity for hope. These are powerful stories and accounts of survival, struggle, strength, and the choice to embrace life. Each of us has different tools to combat anti-Semitism. Some work in politics, some in education, libraries, or the media. Others write books, like my 7 authors who are present here, and I'm very proud of them, of all the work they're doing. For the books that they've written and for what they are doing with those books. I admire them greatly. And even one of my editors is here. Very Hanover is right there. Several of my authors, and I will name them in a moment, joined me yesterday and today at ALA here in Philadelphia. They've helped introduce our books to hopefully thousands of American librarians who are key to preserving history, any history, also Jewish history. Because everybody nowadays talks about inclusion, but there's always one group which is not included in the so-called inclusion, which is mine. In times when books are banned and librarians held personally accountable for what's on their shelves, their perseverance is nothing of courageous. Whenever it feels like shouting into the void, I remind myself a whisper of truth can travel further than a scream of hate, especially when it's echoed by many voices. But the problem is, most people do not echo. I sometimes hear, Liesbeth, you're doing such important work, and when I ask, how would you know? They say, well, I'm following you on social media. But then again, they never ever retweet or follow or, a little laugh. So I think whatever. I don't do it always either. But it's the deafening silence of the majority of people that troubles me. And that kind of silence is neutral, it is enabling. In Germany of the 1930s, it were the silent masses who turned a blind eye. And today, once again, the answer may lie with the silent majority, those who perhaps care but don't know how to help or don't realize the consequences of their inaction. They can no longer afford to stay quiet, since Western civilization is being dismantled from within, very swiftly. If we want to preserve our democratic ideals, we must act. Each of us must do what is within our power. There is, I believe, an essential role for non-Jews. As many of you know, I'm not Jewish nor Christian, I'm an agnostic. But the Jewish people cannot and should not be expected to fight this fight alone. We must all find our voices in speaking out against Jew hatred. And for non-Jews, speaking up against institutional silence and complicity is necessary. There are many excellent educational programs about anti-Semitism and Holocaust history, and we've just heard Flores, fabulous Flores, I think. It's such a beautiful thing, fabulous has said. But what does not yet exist is a foundation that spreads free Holocaust books. And I believe deeply in the power of storytelling, otherwise I wouldn't have started this publishing business, because that's what we do, storytelling. Because stories can move hearts, foster empathy, and resonate across cultures. At our Amsterdam Publishers Authors event in New York last September, I announced the launch of a new non-profit, the Survivor Stories Fund. And I'm happy to report that the first steps have finally been taken. These processes are very slow. And the board is currently pursuing charity status in Holland, and when that's done, I'll move it over to the US under the umbrella of the Netherlands America Foundation. And when money is coming in to the foundation, what we will do with the money, we will donate free books, our books, but also by other Holocaust publishers. Not that there are many, but I can't do anything about that. We will donate books to schools, libraries, institutions, Holocaust museums, and whatever, and to events. And I hope that way the books have more power. Enough preaching for now. You might wonder, what does the daily life of a publisher look like? Well, it's boring. It is very uneventful, actually. But my mornings, they start on a glorious note. Last year at San Diego, at ALA, I bought myself a mug from the Breakfast Republic, and when it's full, it says, unable to communicate in full sentences. When it's halfway down, it says slightly more coherent, but still unable to hold a conversation. And then when it's empty, you may speak now. Now, I love it. So every morning I have a big smile on my face. I think, yes, another day. That's maybe a good one. Not that I have anybody to talk to. I live on my own. My cat has died. My daughters live. They're students. They live elsewhere. Since I work with authors worldwide, if I'm unlucky and I have a Canadian, so that means that I have to get it very early, but usually it's about US authors, and then the first two start at 2, 3, so the mornings are mine. Wonderful. But what do I do in these mornings? I deal with Amazon and Ingram Spark system issues, covers not showing, books arriving late, communicate with editors and cover designers, I input metadata, set up ads, update websites, purchase ISBNs, correct values, manage cover tweets. Well, you've heard enough. Not very exciting. And there is very little timing for any creative thinking. That's why I like these journeys, because every time I do a couple of days before and a couple of days after that I can think of nice things. My current life couldn't be more different from when I worked at Christie's in London or at Sotheby's in Amsterdam. I used to travel through Scandinavia to view Picasso in some wooden cabin and value works of art in a palazzo in Padua, or value the inventory of a modern art gallery in Jerusalem, enjoying endless cocktail parties with wealthy clients. And I was quite good at all those cocktail parties, I loved it. But now, my life is totally different, but much more fulfilling. And since October 7, I feel an even greater sense of urgency. Publishing is one way I contribute, but there's more I feel compelled to do. Now, I have made a little list of what I do in my evening time, but I'm rather sort of an activist, and I'm not sure whether I will mention what I do, but it's for the good cause. I will skip that bit. Sorry?
We want to know.
You want to know?
She said, "Tell us." I'm seconding that.
Okay. Well, I am designing endless stickers that go on lampposts in the Leiden area about Hamas and hummus and Israel or whatever. A very proud blue-white flag is being portrayed on all lampposts in Leiden, where the university is. I love doing that, and I spread them across the Netherlands. They're really great, and these little acts, they're little acts of resistance, yes. But because sometimes I feel flooded about what's happening and I think, my goodness, what else can we do? So that's one. The other one is I am trying to prevent, as an alumni of Leiden University, to prevent university from cutting ties with Israel universities. I think it's insane. Any academic should have, free academic whatever. What else do I do? Yes, I am a member of endless WhatsApp groups in which they love that. I don't know whether you know them. It's a US-based thing. Pens for Swords, I think. Do you know that?
Pants for swords?
Or swords for pens. Pens for swords. They give out sort of, they say what is wrong in the world, so one gets a lot of emails on a daily basis, like 10 or so, and then you click on a link, and then your email address just has to be filled out, and your name, and you send out you speak out against anti-Semitism, or on the other hand, you praise somebody for doing good action. And that's lovely. It's like putting up the stickers. But I can recommend it. So if you want the address, I can. Yeah. So that's a few things. Over to Amsterdam Publishers again. I'm proud that Amsterdam Publishers authors communicate in a private online group, an initiative started by one of them actually. They share contacts, advice, and support each other in events and give each other tips. And it's a joy to see this community grow. So far we had 2 in-person events in New York, both sponsored by the Dutch consulate. And this year I'm going to do it differently because all the authors from New Zealand and Australia and South America, and Israel, they can't travel. So I'm going to organize a very big event with all 116 authors, or as David said, 96 authors on total, whatever. So a big Zoom event with breakout rooms and a wonderful lineup of people. I even want, if anybody has any contact with Steven Spielberg, I would love him to speak. Just only for a few minutes would be nice. Well, we will see whether it's going to happen. But I feel truly blessed with my group of authors. And whether we meet online or in person, it's always meaningful. I'm humbled by this attention that I'm giving today, and I only hope that it will benefit my authors and their books. And I invite you to read them all. I will introduce my author, but if you have any questions, please do so before I introduce my lovely authors. Thank you. Nobody has any questions? Then I will be introducing Nechama Birnbaum. Yes, I've got a question.
You mentioned a new organization or company that's starting that's charitable. Can you repeat the name of it?
Yes, it's not operational as yet, but I have, it is written in the Chamber of Commerce now. It's the Survivor Stories Fund. Apparently it is on the leaflet that you have. Survivor Stories Fund. And it should be operational, I think, within maybe 6 months. It depends how these committees work. Okay, Nechama Birnbaum, hands up. Who hasn't heard of Nechama Birnbaum? She's the author of my best-selling title, The Redhead of Auschwitz. What is that?
You have that?
Since its publication in September 2021, is it already that long ago? Oh my goodness. Okay. It has received over 6,900 reviews, positive ones, all positive, on Amazon, and has been translated into 11 different languages. We're now negotiating the Polish one. So we will just go on until we have covered all languages. Nechama is a powerful voice for remembrance. Her Instagram account, The Redhead of Auschwitz, boasts over 126,000 followers. It's really amazing. And I strongly encourage you to follow her and of course read her book. Her grandmother, Rosie Bernstein, the redhead of the title, was a remarkable woman, sharp, open, and deeply committed to sharing her story to combat hate and promote peace. It was a privilege to publish this memoir while Rosie was still alive. And I had the honor of meeting Rosie, the grandmother, for dinner in Brooklyn. I remember it very clearly. Just a few months before she passed at the age of 96. And I brought my daughters, Esther and Naomi, with me so that they could meet at least a survivor once in their life. And it's a memory I will always cherish. And one little anecdote of Nechama. Last year, Nechama joined me at ALA in San Diego. And I introduced her as, she's one of my authors. It took 5 minutes before people said, oh, you, I know. What is it? Oh, you must be the publisher of Nechama Birnbaum. So it was completely reversing roles. Nechama, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Hi everyone, thank you so much. I just feel so awed to be in Liesbeth's presence tonight and so inspired. Just a quick short story about my grandmother, who's in this, about really Liesbeth and my grandmother. My grandmother was so appreciative that her story was told. It was her dream her entire life to tell her story. And it was a dream that came true when she was 95 years old. And we went out for dinner with Liesbeth, and by the way, she kept talking about your beautiful daughters, and you're the best publisher in the whole world. But she was so happy to be able to share her story. And the reason why she wanted to share her story was because even though she went through the worst hate that humankind could go through, she really believed in love, and she believed that her story could make a difference in people choosing love and choosing better. And she started this Instagram account, which we couldn't take out the phone without her talking to the masses, because she always thought she was on Instagram. Even we were just like, okay, we just smile, we just want to take a picture with you this time. And she spoke to everyone, and she loved it. And Liesbeth really, truly made her dream come true. I just want to share just a quick, short story about my grandmother's Holocaust experience. My grandmother had the numbers tattooed on her arm, and one time I went over to my grandmother, and she was just like, look how pretty my numbers are, look how neat they are. And my grandmother was not vain, but use an adjective for that. She loved dressing up, and she was very careful about her appearances. And so we said, Bobby, pretty numbers? Are you joking? Those are your Auschwitz numbers. And she said, yeah, you have to hear the story. I was online to get a tattoo, and I saw the tattooist was writing sloppy. So I saw the tattooist on the other side was writing neat. And so I risked my life, and I ran over to the other line, and look how neat they are. And so we said, how can you be so vain in Auschwitz? Everybody's dying around you. You're in lice-infested uniform. Your head was shaven, and this is what you cared about, how neat your numbers are? And I'll never forget the look that she gave me. She said, first she laughed at herself because she was so good-natured and so always able to laugh at herself, and then she said, you know what? It wasn't vanity. She said, I knew I was going home from there, and I don't want sloppy numbers on my arm for the rest of my life. That's how much she loved it. So I think in today's time, we can take that lesson, at least I try to take that lesson. It sometimes feels hopeless and scary, and to believe so much in our future, that we have a future that will never, ever be taken away from us. And so much so that even the numbers that they try to brand us with for death, we choose to make them beautiful because we know that we're going to live. Thank you so much.
Next one is Evelyn Joseph Grossman. Evelyn is the author, is the author of Hidden in Berlin, a memoir that forms part of our Holocaust Survivor True Stories series. That's now 39 books strong. The English edition came out 4 years ago, and the German edition has recently been published. The book tells the moving story of Evelyn's parents, Guido and Ernst, who both survived in Berlin during the war. It weaves together their separate paths and the quiet heroism of those who helped them hide. And Evelyn has pieced together the fragments, her father's letters, tape recordings, family notes, and memories. And I had the pleasure of interviewing Evelyn and her mother Lido with her unmistakably strong German accent. I loved it. And I'm very grateful to have published this book while Lido was still with us. Evelyn.
Okay, you can hear me okay? Okay. Thank you to the Philadelphia Jewish community, Tikvah, HAMEC, pRISm, and Sons and Daughters of Holocaust Survivors for recognizing the amazing work, the important work that Liesbeth Heenk has accomplished and honoring her tonight. For me, the motivation for writing my book, Hidden in Berlin, a Holocaust memoir, came in 1995. After a trip to Berlin with my mother, it was my first trip to Germany. For my mother, it was the first time back after being away for almost 50 years. The trip was away for Germany to try to make amends for its horrific past, an impossible task. For years, Mom never wanted to return to Germany, to visit a country that betrayed her and her family, a country where so many were murdered in the camps. Finally, she decided to go, mainly so that I could meet Eva Kassira, the woman who saved her life, and see the house where she lived during the Holocaust. Eva and her mother, Hannah Zuchek, protected my mother with shelter, food, and false identity papers. Hannah died many years ago, but Eva was still alive, and it was time to see her and say thank you. After walking the streets of Berlin, past the house where my mom grew up, past the empty lot where my father's house once was, and meeting Eva, I knew I needed to preserve my parents' story. Writing the book required lots of research, information from Yad Vashem, the International Tracing Service, documents from HAMEC on resettling my grandmother to the US after the war, written notes from my father and Uncle Gerhard, and endless conversations with my mother. Finally, the book was complete. I was thrilled to get a message from Amsterdam Publishers that they were interested in publishing it. That was September 2020. Liesbeth thought we could get the book out in the spring. At that time, Mom was 97, still living on her own, but her health was failing. I asked, is it possible to get the book out sooner? Liesbeth listened and said yes, she would make it a priority. In December, the book was finalized. There is a wonderful photo on the Amsterdam Publishers website of Mom holding the book. The story, holding the book, the story of her and my dad. This is their wedding picture. It was taken in 1947, 2 years after the war. So it's, the story goes, the book goes into the details. 10 weeks after the book came out, 10 weeks, on February 22nd, 2021, Mom passed away. Thank you, Liesbeth, for giving Mom and me this gift. The stories that all of us write burn inside of us. They need to come out. They need to be heard. Each is different. We share our stories in libraries, in synagogues, at book fairs, in community centers, in newspaper articles, on Goodreads and on Amazon. The 116 books that Liesbeth has published has impacted tens of thousands. We are the ambassadors of Amsterdam Publishers, a forceful defense against Holocaust deniers, and a platform to ensure the stories of the Holocaust will never be forgotten.
Thank you very much, Evelyn. Next one is Peter Wiesner. Who doesn't know Peter? Peter is the author of Bipolar Refugee, a saga of survival and resilience, published 2 years ago. Until we met in New York last September, I had only known Peter as a gentle, soft-spoken voice in our correspondence and Zooms. When I mentioned I'd be attending ALA in Philadelphia, Peter immediately offered to help. He said, "Oh, I live nearby, and I have contacts in the Jewish community. Maybe you want to do an event?" I said, "Well, fine, it will never pull off, but there we are." Peter is very persistent, and he did it. So it's all thanks to Peter that this is happening. Thank you very much for that. I'm very grateful for this. The book tells the story of his mother, Mary Wiesner, one of 10,000 children rescued by the King Transport. And the love and devotion Peter has for his mother comes through in every single chapter. The book is a fulfilled promise from a son to his mother. Over to you, Peter.
started writing or thinking about writing the book when I inherited my mother's red suitcase, which was full of her papers, her diary, her aspirations, poetry, drawings, what have you. I already knew her story, but like a lot of people in those days, I didn't really want to confront the Holocaust in terms of the horrors that were experienced in the camps. It's just such an overwhelming story, but I felt compelled to do something about it, and went about the task of writing it. And it took a while. I had to learn to write for a non-academic audience, and it took a little while, a lot of rewriting, and even went to an agent who said, well, you got a great story, but it's not compelling enough. So I said, well, I gotta really learn the craft, and I wrote a science fiction novel just to sharpen my teeth a little bit, and then went about doing this job. And of course then, and I wrote it, and then I said, well, where am I gonna get published? Somebody said, well, you gotta get an agent. So I went online, and I picked, I used an online tool, and I discovered that there are agents who may or may not be interested in memoirs. So I contacted them, and the software was called Query Tracker, and they all said, yeah, your manuscript is good, it's a wonderful story, but I'm afraid, this is not a moneymaker, okay? So I said, well, I got this thing, it's done, it's almost polished. So I said, well, maybe I'll try an academic publisher, and I contacted one, and somebody bit right away, and they said, okay, we'll do it, but you're gonna have to do all the design work, and there's not gonna be much editorial support, and the best thing we can do for you is really just to distribute it through a chain of distribution network. And I said, well, that sounds good, but it didn't sound good enough. And then a good friend of ours, whom I went to school with, and my wife also, we all were at Penn and all, and she said, well, why don't you try Amsterdam Publishers? And I said, well, who are they? And she said, well, they're the premier publisher of Holocaust memoirs. Okay. So I contacted Liesbeth. I sent an email, and I got a quick response, because I already had the manuscript. And she said, okay, we'll go for it, here are the terms. And she, I discovered who she was. She was a Dutch woman, very practical, gets right to the point. Here are my rules. If you're gonna publish this thing, you're gonna have to use AP. You're gonna have to do it our way, but we're with you. You got a great story. We'll work with you on the artwork. We're open to discussion, back and forth. If I didn't like, and I learned if I didn't like something, I could speak plainly to her. And she thought I was kind of off the rails. She said she put me straight. And I loved it, because I knew that what she had there was unique, which was a whole commitment to deal with Holocaust stories, and a commitment to work with the authors, bring them together on a website, which is used, for various reasons, either to promote yourself or to find some resource. But what it does, it creates a community for writers, and it also makes you part of something bigger, because writing is a very lonely activity, and promoting and all that is also, it's fun because you get to meet people, but it's laborious, and you have to be patient with it. And I also knew it wouldn't be a moneymaker, because, bipolar refugee, it's not about the camps. It's about bipolar. And somebody said, well, what does that mean? Is it like South and North Pole? No, bipolar. And refugee? Well, yeah. But the thing is, I felt compelled to use this title because it opened the door to things that I was passionate about. One is mental health care, and that's what impelled me to seek out Tikvah, and they were very responsive, and that's why we have this event, in large part because of my association with Tikvah. And of course, the Holocaust Awareness Museum, which is a really genuine effort to reach out to people in the community. And they're not splashy, they want to do the work. And it's true for both of those organizations. Of course, the synagogue has a reputation that spreads way beyond Philadelphia, you know. And KI is another great synagogue that is very open. So it provided me with an opportunity to become engaged. And also, it kind of provided me not a justification, but a motivation to really stick with this effort, because there are other issues that are really important. You know, the refugee issue, which isn't that far different from what my mother experienced, the mental health issues, and people being marginalized in society, LGBT, I mean, and I was delighted that we had the support of the gay community in holding this event. It's so important because the story of gay people and what they suffered during the Holocaust is unspeakable, and it's pretty much marginalized, and it shouldn't be. So I'm really pleased to be part of this effort to combat people who use, diversity, DEI and all these. They weaponize problems, and we have to fight it with truth, with commitment, and sincerity. So I'm really thankful for this opportunity to be here and to be able to meet all you folks here. Thanks a lot.
Author is Robin Black. Now Robin is the odd one out. Odd one out?
On what?
The odd one. Well, she's the
Oh,
author.
I am the odd one. Yes. Yeah.
The Journey of a Hidden Child, written in collaboration with survivor Harry Pila. Robin is not related to Harry, but she specializes in researching and writing Holocaust memoirs for others. So that's the way in which you are the odd one out? Yes.
Yes, I'm adopted. I'm not her child.
Robin faced a very difficult challenge when writing the story for Harry Pila. Harry knew very little about his own past, and what he did remember often turned out to be inaccurate. So where do you start then? As a researcher, very difficult. So Robin did what she does best, and that's rigorous historical research. She used archival materials, eyewitness accounts, and expert consultations to reconstruct the story. And the result is a powerful, intimate, and accurate narrative of survival.
Okay, so before I get started, mine's on my computer because I misunderstood the assignment, which I found out late last night. I thought we were all speaking for 15 minutes. And it turns out we were all supposed to be done within 15 minutes total. So I had to do some editing until 12:22 last night. And I couldn't do it on paper. I had to do it on my computer. So I apologize for the one sticker that says book slut. So that's what I am. That's larger. Hold on a second while I get into my, okay, here it is. When I do my speaking engagements, I always start with this, when I first learned of the Holocaust, and I'm going to do that now. I remember with crystal clarity when I first heard of the Holocaust. It was the summer of 1975, and I was 9 years old, sitting at the kitchen table with my mother. I was eager to finish my lunch so I could go to the swim club. Whatever she and I were talking about, and I do not remember, somehow prompted her to deliver a platter of terrifying facts. How in the 1940s there was this thing called a Holocaust, and these people called Nazis tried to kill all the Jews in Europe, nearly succeeding until we defeated them in 1945. So 1945, 1975, really easy math. And I said, but Mom, that wasn't that long ago. I was horrified. Didn't that kind of stuff happen in the olden days, like in biblical times? Then my memory skips to middle school, and I'm in my new middle school, not in elementary school anymore, and the library has some books on the Holocaust, and I devour all 3 of them. First is I Am Rosemary, about a Dutch girl, a much-loved only child, Rosemary and her mother are never separated at Westerbork, the transit camp, and Bergen-Belsen. The other women there dote on Rosemary, and one even gives her a drop-state chocolate bar for her birthday, a treasure more valuable than diamonds. So my introduction to Holocaust literature was soft and age-appropriate. After finishing the book, my key takeaway was how cozy, like a sleepaway camp that you get to go with your mother and a bunch of her friends. Clearly not very accurate. Next was The Summer of My German Soldier, which was a pretty famous book. It's still in print. There was a sequel. That came next. Set in Arkansas, it was about the unlikely friendship between a 12-year-old Jewish girl and the escaped German POW, a gentle young man strongly opposed to Nazism whom she hides. No Nazis here. No transit camps, concentration camps, no death camps. Reading about the awkward girl and the young POW who found her charming appealed to my romantic budding sensibilities. It was like West Side Story, but with all finger snapping. Then came When Hitler Stole Pink Rabbit by Judith Kerr, still in print. She ended up writing 2 sequels to that. She was a German girl. It was written as fiction, but she fictionalized her story. She was a German girl who had to flee her country in 1933 because her father had criticized the Nazi Party well before the tanks rolled into Poland. But by not revealing too much of the horror, these books encouraged me to learn more rather than scaring me away. Just 1 year later, I was one of among 109 million viewers to graduate from NBC's 5-night PhD program in Holocaust Studies. Does anybody know what I'm talking about?
The movie, the Holocaust.
The groundbreaking 5-night NBC miniseries, The Holocaust, 1978. April 1978. Set initially in Berlin, the Holocaust featured the lives of the Weiss family in the months leading up to, during, and just after World War II. And the series didn't stint. All the nasty bits were there. Kristallnacht, the T4 euthanasia program, the Einsatz group and the mobile killing squads, the Warsaw Ghetto, the Wannsee Conference where the final solution was mapped out, the Sophie's Choice-like decisions imposed upon the Judenrat, Buchenwald and Theresienstadt, the infamous propaganda camp that I just visited 3 weeks ago, and the gas chambers of Sobibor, Treblinka, and Auschwitz. I watched the character Erich Dorf transform from an ordinary German into a sadistic Nazi after he seeks employment from the SS out of desperation. During his interview, an SS officer asks for his views concerning Jews. Erich replies, neutral. By the final episode, he's a rabid Nazi charged with war crimes. I did not have to go back and watch these scenes or read about it. This is all here from 1978. The Holocaust even had Meryl Streep, who played the Gentile wife of one of Dr. Weiss's sons. Her performance garnered her first Emmy. Elie Wiesel hated it. He told the New York Times he believed the series trivialized the Shoah. But the Holocaust had a significant impact, especially in West Germany, where it was broadcast 1 year later. After it aired, the West German parliament removed the statute of limitations on war crimes. The series is also credited with educating many Germans, particularly the younger generation, about the scale of the common people's participation in the Holocaust. Young people who watched began to question their forebears. Hey, Opa, hey, Oma, what were you doing 40, 50 years ago? The German weekly news magazine Der Spiegel stated that the Holocaust, and I've been quoting now, managed to do what hundreds of books, plays, films, and TV broadcasts, thousands of documents, and all concentration camp trials in 3 decades of post-war history failed to do. to inform Germans about the crimes committed against the Jews in their name in such a way that millions were shaken. Malcolm Gladwell pointed out that after its broadcast, North America went from having just one Holocaust museum in LA to hundreds springing up all around the world. In 2019, so not that long ago, it's the 40th anniversary of the controversial broadcast in Germany of the Holocaust. This time it was being broadcast in connection with a documentary entitled How the Holocaust Came to TV. And that documentary depicted the impact of the series, The Holocaust, on its original 1979 audience. At the same time, the BBC conducted a survey to coincide with the rebroadcast, and the results were really disturbing. At the time of the rebroadcast and the documentary in 2019, fewer than half of all German school children had any knowledge of Auschwitz. Once again, anti-Semitism is on the rise at an alarming pace. Just this past January 23rd, 2025, the Conference on Jewish Material Claims Against Germany, known as the Claims Conference, released its first ever 8-country index on Holocaust knowledge and awareness, and its findings were grim. Of the younger population of Germany, 48, almost half of the respondents, could not name a single concentration camp or ghetto established during the Holocaust, not even Auschwitz. In the US poll, it was revealed that while most younger Americans are aware that the Holocaust occurred, they are not familiar with specific details, such as how many victims there were, or the nature of the ghettos. Or, and this next finding chills me to my core, most younger Americans are not familiar, or were not, well, a few months ago, they were not familiar with how Adolf Hitler came to power, which we are rewatching right here. Considering what's brewing here in the US and beyond, it should scare everyone, and not just Jews. This poll exposes the epidemic of ignorance surrounding the Holocaust and the policies that led to it. Education is the best treatment to combat Holocaust illiteracy. Education comes in many forms, but tonight I'm just going to focus on books. Books by scholars, books by witnesses, books by survivors, books by children of survivors, which is a network that's so large, it's very recognizable as 2G, second generation. And books by the grandchildren of survivors, like Nechama, the 3G, or third generation, on whom we are increasingly dependent because they are the last family members who have the benefit of having heard these stories firsthand. Then there are books written on behalf of survivors or their children or grandchildren, and that's where I come in. Many survivors and their descendants have troves of historically significant and valuable material, but they may lack the confidence, the time, the skills, or the emotional strength needed to write. However, they still have a desire for others to learn what they lived through and to know what they lived through, what they suffered. Some survivors don't know enough about their own stories and can't move forward without procuring the services of someone who specializes in Holocaust research and writing. And that was the case, like Liesbeth said, with my book. My client, Harry Pila, was just 6 weeks old when his parents gave him to their Gentile friends for safekeeping. He was in Belgium. His surviving parent shared very little information with him, and what he was told proved to be entirely false. Harry had quite a story, but he didn't even know it, and for a long time neither did I, because the information he was giving me was false. My research was going nowhere. And I told him, I don't think there's enough for a book. Well, that turned out not to be true. After my first research trip to the Holocaust Museum, within 5 minutes, there was a book, and I knew it. When the book was completed, Harry wanted to self-publish immediately. He was over 80 years old and anxious for it to circulate among his family, friends, and hopefully beyond. But I worked really, really hard. I was really proud of this book. And I wanted not just the added legitimacy of a real publisher, but I wanted a wider audience for it than self-publishing might give it. The story of Harry and his family cast a very wide net, making it a good selection for someone new to the subject, as well as for those with a broader knowledge base. I asked Harry to give me a month. I knew it was next to impossible. It was my third book, but I didn't have an agent. And if I tried the major publishing houses, the manuscript would fester in what's called a slush pile, one of dozens of unsolicited manuscripts. Eventually, it would be plucked out by a junior editor, likely with limited knowledge of the Holocaust. Instead, I Googled Holocaust publisher, and Amsterdam Publishers popped up. I hastily wrote a cover letter, attached the manuscript, and hit send. I had zero hopes, but at least I had tried. One morning, about 2 weeks later, I opened an email. Dear Robin, I fear your inbox is full. Did you get my message below? Kind regards, Liesbeth Heenk. No, I had not gotten the message below. It had gone to my spam folder, which I never checked, because at the time, I had little awareness of what a spam folder was. So I scrolled down. Dear Robin, I read, in the meantime, I have read your manuscript. It is compelling and intelligently written. I am very pleased to let you know. And at this point, I screamed so loudly that my loud, at the time, 7th grader complained loudly. So I returned the email. Very pleased to let you know that I can accept your book for publication. It perfectly fits Amsterdam's mission, blah, blah, blah. Please indulge me as I revisit my glory, because Liesbeth is not stingy with her praise. This is a gripping Holocaust memoir. One can only appreciate the rigorous research that has gone into it. The narrative voice keeps the reader engaged from start to finish. You provide lots of historical facts on the horrors caused by the Nazi regime and offer a broad overview of Jewish life and culture during World War II, both in Belgium and Poland. I'm certainly very pleased to publish it. Liesbeth works tirelessly. Let me amend that, I'm sure she's exhausted all the time. Unwaveringly dedicated to publishing the highest caliber Holocaust memoirs, Liesbeth delivers at an exceptional pace. I'm gonna repeat this quote, but last year, she told me that she will not rest until she produces 6 million books. Liesbeth grasps the consequences of anti-Semitism, and it is her life's mission to mitigate the baseless hate. She is galvanized by the inevitable future without a single living Holocaust survivor, in concert with the rise in anti-Semitism. This formula drove her to turn Amsterdam Publishers into the largest publisher of Holocaust memoirs in Europe. Liesbeth is a beacon, the embodiment of a righteous Gentile. There really is no praise too high for her. The world is a better place because she is in it. I am so fortunate and so very thankful to be a member of her ever-growing family of authors.
Beautiful. Max Friedman, where are you, Max? Yes, Max. Max Friedman is the author of Painful Joy, a Holocaust family memoir published in April 2022. It has been widely praised, featured in the Jewish Chronicle, Times of Israel, and many more. Kirkus reviews describe it as a sweeping and nuanced story of living with the effects of trauma. The book explores the lives of Max's parents, Sam and Frida, who rarely spoke about their past, and when they did, the stories were often incomplete or inaccurate. Max and I share a warm friendship. We toured Coney Island together, then in Leiden and Delft in the rain. Max is a born storyteller, and I'm afraid this also shows in his emails to me. There's Shalom next. So over to Max. Thank you very much. You want this?
Yes, hair so long, I'm so short, she's so tall. Life is like that. I didn't plan everything. I wrote things down because I write long things. And this will keep me from talking for too long. So my whole life, I'm a professional writer. This is what I've been doing for a living because I was very bad at math and I spelled well. But the only story that I couldn't write was my own story. So my parents, as Liesbeth said, were Sam and Friedman. They were Polish, Jewish Holocaust survivors who actually met after their liberation from Bergen-Belsen in Sweden, where they were taken by the Swedish Red Cross to recuperate. They were given 6 months to recuperate and then find someplace else to live. They couldn't find any place else to live. Instead, they got married, and my sister and I were born there in Sweden. And eventually, America was willing to take us, and 7 years later, we came to the United States. My parents in Bergen-Belsen had gotten there through the death marches. They had spent nearly the entire war in either the ghettos, in slave labor camps, or in concentration camps. Yet, I knew almost nothing about what happened to them. All I knew is that we spent our younger years and all the years that they were alive in the shadow of the Holocaust. My mother could never stop talking about the camps. Day in and day out, I still believe that the first words that I ever uttered was Mengele, because they were burned into our memories. Yet, I didn't know anything else. I didn't know about who she lost, what happened to her, and what I guess she might have been if it weren't for Krakow Ghetto and Plaszow and Heimanget and Joseph Mengele and Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen and everybody she ever knew and loved being murdered. As for my father was a lovely, sweet man who never wanted to talk about his past. I didn't know anything. The only time I heard about his past was when I was trying to get out of the draft for the Vietnam War. And I told my father, because I knew something, I knew that these two people didn't really get along very well, but had nightmares nearly every night that we would have to wake them from, we being my older sister and I. And so I told him that I had heard I could get an emotional deferment if somebody was emotionally so attached to me that if something happened to me, their lives would end. And I was sincerely convinced that that was the case. And so for 20 minutes in Brighton Beach, we sat by the water, and he told me one story. It turned out the story that he told me was a story about the last time he saw his wife and his two little girls. But he didn't tell me their names. He didn't tell me anything really substantive that I could deal with. I just said, okay, I went to the draft board, I got a deferment. And that was it. Ultimately, they got older, they fought with each other endlessly. My mother told us one story as well beyond about the camps, which was a story about how her life was extraordinarily wonderful before the war, before the Holocaust. And in the course of doing my research, I found out that story was a fantasy, totally a fantasy. My mother did not have a dance studio, which actually I thought I found when I visited Poland. And it was somebody else's dance studio, clearly maybe Arthur Murray or something. And instead, she was a washerwoman, and she took other people's laundry. And that's what I discovered. And so, all of that, finding out who my father's first wife was, I actually discovered a niece that he had working at Yad Vashem of all places. And I learned the names of his two daughters, Ada and Pila. They were 4.5 and 1.5 when they were murdered. And when I visited Auschwitz, I walked on their ashes. And the result of doing all that really was because of my grandson, Jacob. And I just told him in terms of that they had difficult lives, and I called them survivors. And that really got him interested, the word survivor. And so he started to ask me, he said, is my son, Noah, is my dad a survivor? Are you a survivor? Will I be a survivor? And I said, you know, Jacob, I don't know anymore. I don't know anything. And from 2016 to the time this book was published, I found out. I found out what it meant to be a survivor, not only what I saw, but what they went through, what they might have been if they hadn't endured the Holocaust and survived the Holocaust. I learned truths, and I learned things that I would never, ever learn. And I learned that there was somebody named Liesbeth. I sent her a manuscript. I wrote a story after 5 years of doing this, of writing their story down, and I was going to just self-publish it and give it to my small family. And then I said, a friend who was a book designer said, what about this place, Holocaust, Amsterdam Publishers, this woman? She says in 2 weeks, she'll tell you yes or no. I said, what the hell? And in 2 weeks, she sends an email, and she says, let's do a Zoom. And the first thing she says, I'd like to publish your book. And at the end of our conversation, she told me this, and this, and this, and that. I said, could you repeat that again? I have to tell my wife. What am I supposed to tell her? She said, I'm publishing your book. I said, oh my God. And we went to Brighton Beach in Coney Island, where I grew up, where my parents lived and tried to survive. And it's magical. And the experience was magical and wonderful. And I must say, Liesbeth may not be Jewish, but she's a real mensch. She has our love and she has our adoration. Thank you.
Next one is Roslyn Bernstein. Roslyn is the author of a novel. And I have very few novels that I published, but Roslyn's is very good. And it was a finalist in the National Jewish Book Awards. I don't know if you know the book world, but that is really very prestigious. And it earned a rare review in Kirkus, a starred review in Kirkus Reviews. The book is set in Jerusalem during the 1961 Eichmann trial. And the novel draws from the month Roslyn spent in Israel that same year. It's a very compelling blend of coming-of-age story, historical mystery, and a reflection on post-Holocaust identity. Roslyn is a professor emerita of journalism at Baruch College and has taught writing for most of her career, and it shows. She's also, very importantly, the proud owner of the best rooftop terrace in Soho. Over to you, Roslyn.
That's thanks to my husband. Can you hear me? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. So I have to begin by saying that as someone who was a college professor for decades, when someone said to me, can you give a little introductory speech of about 500 words or 3 minutes? That's exactly what I did. I timed myself. So when I'm listening today, I realize that perhaps what I wrote down is a little short, but it's short and it's from my heart. So this is what came to me. Some things are just meant to be. However long it takes to make them happen. Beshirt, or beshirt, depending how you pronounce it, is a Yiddish word that generally means destiny or meant to be. It is most commonly used in the context of finding one's soulmate. Well, I found 2 soulmates, so I guess that's short. Or a destined partner. But it can also refer to any fortuitous or fated event. In essence, it implies something that was predetermined or preordained. And Beshirt most aptly describes how Liesbeth Heenk and Amsterdam Publishers published my novel, this one, The Girl Who Counted Numbers. I just want to stop for a minute, interrupt myself and say that this photograph, the top part is a photograph by Evelyn Libashenka, who was a member of the Bauhaus School of Art in Berlin and left Germany just seconds, minutes, a week before Hitler came to power. So when I discovered this in my research for a cover, I had to use that book. Anyway, the novel is a part mystery and part coming-of-age story. An American girl named Susan is sent to Israel to see if she can find out whether her father's older brother, Yaakov, survived the Holocaust. Some people say that the American girl in this book has resemblances to me. There was no Uncle Yaakov. It's a novel. Okay. Despite contacting all possible sources, the family has never found any record of his name, Yaakov Reich, anywhere, in any archive. And there's great archives to be found, but nothing. And the book is really about Susan's search for what happened to her uncle, her father's older brother. Now, the most interesting thing about this is, I lived in Israel in 1961. I was on a fellowship from Brandeis University, the Hyatt Fellowship, and I lived in a little apartment in Rehavia, across the street from a pension that housed most of the journalists for the trial, including Hannah Arendt. I have a few pictures of her, and I tried to get quotes from her. She was most reticent to give me any leads or tips. So I lived in Israel, and the other thing that's distinctive and true is that when I arrived in Israel, after my sophomore year in college, I already spoke Hebrew. Pretty good Hebrew. I understood it, Was I fluent in speech? I don't know, but if you spoke Hebrew, I understood everything. I had started life in a yeshiva for a couple of years, then not studied Hebrew for 10 years, and then studied Hebrew in college. And what I used to do when I was finished going to the Ulpan, or our classes, Brandeis classes is, I used to play hooky, sneak out a little bit, and go to the coffee shops on Ben Yehuda Street. Some of you may know that whole area, Ben Yehuda, Cafe Atara, most famous one. And I would sit there and tell you what I did. I would eavesdrop. The place was filled with survivors, whispering, talking, telling their stories. Some in Yiddish, I'm not fluent Yiddish, but mostly in Hebrew. And I never planned on writing a book then. I was a pre-med student majoring in political science and economics with a minor in English. That shows you that my head was spinning, and I was a good student who didn't know what you wanted to be, but I knew I wanted to listen to those stories. And I did. And I remembered those stories all the time. I became friendly with people who worked there. And my book, therefore, although it's a novel, I hope I've already made it clear to you, it's a novel really based on experience. It's a novel based on living in Israel. It's a novel based on speaking the language, speaking to survivors, listening to what was largely broadcast. Very few people had television. In America we had television, but in Israel a lot of people listened on the radio to the Eichmann trial and going to the Eichmann trial. And of course I never ever will forget going to the Eichmann trial. They didn't let many people in, and I had a friend who had a friend who had a friend who had a friend, and through various political help, I got into the Eichmann trial on the days when I heard several survivors speak. So we have the story of Susan looking for her uncle, the one who doesn't exist, the fiction, and interwoven in this is a second theme. And I didn't know whether when I wrote this book in 2021, how relevant it would be post the moment we're in now. Because the second theme is the relationship, the tension between the Shoah survivors and the new immigrants who were coming into Israel. They didn't all get along. Each one thought they deserved all the help they could get, and they did. But there wasn't all the help they could get for everyone. So I befriended many Moroccans and others, and so my story weaves together those two themes. The theme of the lost uncle, is he alive or not? I won't tell you that, it won't be a spoiler. The immigrants, and it also has a queer component to the story. So it's a mystery, it's a coming of age book, and it's a historically true book too. This experience I had stayed with me for decades, and as I said, I could only write it when I made a discovery. I had a fellowship at the Virginia Center for Creative Arts. I was down there, and the application had a small paragraph, kind of ludicrous. It said, what project do you want to work on? And it was about a 1 inch by 1 inch square. So I thought, gee, they don't expect much, but, and I wrote, I want to write a novel about 1961 Israel. And the key word in that sentence was novel, because it had taken me that long. I've written other books, nonfiction books, okay, a book about Soho, I'm an arts and culture journalist, so I've written other books, but I had not thought of this as a novel. I had thought of this as a nonfiction book. But the minute I wrote that down, all the pieces, all those eavesdropping, all the characters, the book just came together in my head. So I began writing the book, wrote it very quickly, and then thought, I've used agents with other books, what shall I do? But as you've heard others say today, only I'll use another word. I found my shirt in Liesbeth, because the same experience that all these other writers have said, the email answered in 2 weeks is true of me. And the funny thing was, I was a little delayed in returning it, and so if I recollect, Liesbeth sent me a second email saying, pretty much saying, hey, are you there? What's up? And I was embarrassed, but I immediately responded. My book has had really a remarkable, I must tell you about this. I've written all other books. This book won a finalist in the Jewish fiction competition, and the most amazing thing, it got a Kirkus star review, but the big thing was that at the end of 2023, when the end of the year, Kirkus included me in the top 100 Indies books published in the year. So I had to read that twice. Really, I did. And what they said, pardon me, what they said, maybe it's not here, but they said that it was wrapped in a mystery, but a novel that told more truth than fiction, than nonfiction often does. I would like to tell you one other thing, that working with Liesbeth was a miracle. I have worked with so many editors, magazine editors, and I work with so many editors, magazine editors, thank you. But, you know, I remember I once wrote a story about living in the Catskills. I once wrote a story about the Catskills for New York Magazine. The editor wrote back and said, I love your story, but we cannot call the places people lived in country cottages. I'll run your story if you change it from country cottages. I said, no, pull my story. I wrote bungalows. They lived in bungalows. So my experience with editors has been mixed, but my experience with Liesbeth has been marvelous. And so, and one other thing I want to tell you, just the last thing. So I found this photo, I sent it to her with the print, right with the cover, and I got a short response. What do you think about changing the type from white to light blue? That's the kind of attention she pays to her writers, and I thank you.
And last but not least, Oren Schneider. Oren is the author of The Apprentice of Buchenwald, published on International Holocaust Remembrance Day 2 years ago. And the book tells the story of the incredible story of Oren's grandfather, Alexander Rosenberg. Oren is modest about his achievements. He has an MBA, has led major companies, and recently launched Indoma, a venture in neurological recovery. Yet, his author bio simply says that he enjoys music, cooking, travel, and people. That's the type of person Oren is. His book was among our 5 most read titles last year, and again this year with the German edition leading the way. German books are being read widely, which is very good. The Germans have learned something. When Oren speaks, people listen. I learned so much from his book, especially his grandfather's 3 life lessons. I hope you will share them with us.
Thank you, Liesbeth, for the sponsoring organizations. Thank you for having us. We're out of time, so I'll be very, very brief. Liesbeth, the world is lucky to have you, and I'm lucky to have found you. I think Liesbeth gave the gist of the story. I'll just spend a minute talking about the background. And the background is the tragedy and the beauty of the young country of Israel, where I lost my father when I was a toddler. He was an Air Force fighter pilot, and his plane went down, which posed a unique situation for a Holocaust survivor who's lost everything, his community, his culture, his German language, most of his relatives, and had to deal with a young military orphan. And we found each other. I was broken and he was broken, and we were broken together. And he started telling me his concentration camp stories when I was 3. And I started recording him when I was 6. And we spent many years together, and we went back to Europe, and when the Iron Curtain went down, we traveled back to Buchenwald and back to his little village in Slovakia. And I was very fortunate to have him recreate his experiences through me, and when I wrote the book, it felt as if I was really there. So it is a very uplifting Holocaust story, and I would like to end with a high note. It's a story of hope. It's a story of a person who had lost everything but kept his philosophy that life is beautiful, that if you don't take care of yourself, no one else is going to take care of you, and that you should always think positively. And I leave it to you to read the story of young Alexander teaming up with the Soviet POWs to sabotage Hitler's guns. It's a beautiful story that he told me. Thank you very much.
That's the end of it. My authors have brought all their books with them. You can purchase them from the authors, and they will probably also sign it. Thank you very much for coming.